Europe, so that has nothing really to do with it. I know, for example, that Prince Charles has got family in Transylvania, but I don't think we are related to
Fair
that.
enough.
So
And I didn't want to, I don't want to sound flippant or silly. These are just things that we sometimes explore in the program. Right then, here's something. A lot of talk in physics, in astrophysics, in science about time and time not being linear. Now, again, don't think now I'm going down silly roads because this is very serious for you, and I want to come back to that. You might be a threat to somebody or some institution. Maybe not now, but maybe in the near future. Or as I said, there might be some information that you have that could be beneficial to party A but harmful to party B. And that's what might be going on here. Have you considered any of those possibilities?
Well, actually, yes and no. So not in the way you phrased it, because I think the truth is, if you look at what I actually did, it was very, very simple stuff. I mean, I'm a very altruistic person. I'm always trying to have projects where I'm helping people, but I think this in itself is not enough. I think you have to look at the entire thing differently. You have to think in terms of systems, which at first sounds very complex, but suddenly will make everything crystal clear. So I think my first answer to you would be no. However, I do have my own little, theories, and I have noticed odd things myself, especially statistically unusual things. And one of the statistically unusual things I genuinely find very, very worrying is the fact that in the last 5 or 10 years, quite a lot of mathematical prodigies have died in sometimes very unusual circumstances. Sometimes it looked like a takedown operation and then it looked like they killed themselves or they had strange accidents and things like that. And if you want to talk about powerful people and what might really be a thorn in their side, I think mathematical prodigies are one of them.
Why? What would these mathematical prodigies be working on that might offend intelligence agencies and governments? Why?
Well, if you look at, well, I think it's not even necessarily one particular project. It's the fact that once you are a math prodigy or any sort of, but math particularly, because then you understand systems and you can very quickly analyze systems. You can essentially, a math prodigy in a sense has this gift that he or she can within a second spot something and make associations that would maybe take a lifetime to someone else. So if you want to keep your population stupid, then prodigies are essentially like an atom bomb because they would spot something straight away that maybe took you decades to cover up. They would immediately know, they would spot that something is out of whack, immediately analyze what lies behind it. And as soon as they open their mouth, once the secret is out, that's it. You can never go back. Once you have knowledge, once you have the insight, you can never go back. And you probably know this effect that back at school when you had to solve a math equation, solving the math equation was very, very hard. But then checking that your result was correct was very easy because you plug it just back in the equation. And this is essentially it. If you've got a math prodigy, within seconds, he or she can work out what the real story is and say, hang on, guys, listen up. This is what I think is actually happening. And as soon as they've spoken the sentence or the paragraph, suddenly people think, oh my God, he or she is right. And then you can never go back into ignorance.
And cutting edge mathematicians are on, at the moment, they're on, one of the things they're on is the simulation universe theory, right? That the universe is a digital construct. And while some of the tabloid newspapers have talked about this, and they've done so kind of, sometimes in a kind of a humorous way, sometimes in a serious way, this is a big thing. If humanity were to understand that the reality they believe exists and the one they're living in isn't actually real. Again, is this an area that, speaking of mathematicians and prodigies, is that something that they might want to cover up extensively?
Yes, but again, I think people are always after the really unusual. They're after UFOs and aliens. And I say to everybody, actually, I know it sounds boring at first, but you will discover truly wondrous things if you just go after the mundane. Because that's where usually where the dead dogs are buried. And I would say, yes, it's true, math prodigies are, very, very dangerous, but not because they would suddenly, find the key to the universe or do solve any of those problems, which I think at their core are very theoretical. No, no, no. It's actually much simpler than that. A math prodigy can look at a derivative and immediately spot it's a financial scam. A math prodigy can look at financial things, at structures, at computer programs, spot backdoors, or even create them for you. They are,
Yeah, but that being said now, and I don't want to waste time arguing with you on this. That being said, Catherine, you don't have to be a maths prodigy to realise the inherent flaws in the global financial system.
Absolutely.
It's, because it's a complete and utter illusion. Money is an illusion. It's invented out of thin air by central banks. We all know that. So you don't need the maths prodigy to point that out. But I know where you're going with this. And I'm absolutely fascinated by it. First of all, I'm going to say this. We're going to extend the programme. So long as Catherine is okay by that, we're going to extend it by 10 or 15 minutes because you've more to say and I don't want to cut you off. And the beauty of having your own radio station, Catherine, is you can do whatever you want. So we can stay on till 1/4 the next hour, or 20 past if need be. I just want to, if you're okay to do that, we'll do that. Right.
I will endeavour to make it worth your listeners' while.
Well, it's certainly worth their while. Have no doubt about that. It's been worth their while so far. We are joined today by Catherine Horton, Dr. Catherine Horton. As I mentioned, and I'm going to mention again, not because we bow down at the feet of academia, but because it's important, because she is a system woman, a system-trained woman. First-class Master of Physics and PhD in Particle Physics from Hartford College, University of Oxford. Former Research Fellow at St. John's College. Story's extraordinary. Having worked at DESI in Hamburg, the Large Hadron Collider in CERN, she was attending the court case, the dispute between Boris Berezovsky and Roman Abramovich. She went there day after day after day for 6 weeks. It was a case study. She was looking into the physics of the complexes of human systems. That took her to this case to observe the English legal system. She was there day in, day out. After that, nightmare began to be followed around by all manner of men in their 60s and 70s who made it known to her that they were following her around, stalking her everywhere, outside the house. It became sinister, grinning at her in sinister ways. When she went to Germany, it got worse. She believes that she was targeted by direct energy weapons, which have had a profound effect on her health, have affected the health of her friends and family as well. We talked about her husband, who's a theoretical physicist. He's still not on board with what Catherine is saying. He still doesn't quite believe it, which obviously has been a source of frustration and I would imagine worry and concern to Catherine. We've been talking about what might be going on. We've never heard from anybody like Catherine from this level of academia. We've never heard from anybody like this who believes that they've been targeted like this. The non-stop harassment and the crimes committed against her. She's contacted these GCHQ intelligence agencies to say, stop doing what you're doing to me and my family, or at the very least explain to me what's going on. She's got nowhere. She's contacted tabloid newspapers here in Germany. And Catherine, this is if there was nothing in this, an Oxford educated PhD, the tabloids would be all over the story just to discredit you and say this woman is crazy. But they haven't even done that. You can't even get a journalist to come and sit down with you and listen to what you have to say. Hence, you're here. You're tweeting us. You tweeted David Icke today. You tweeted me to say, this is what's happening. I want to tell this story. Can I read you something before we move on? It's 5 to the top of the hour. We're staying on, folks, because this is huge. On the Prince Charles thing and on Transylvania, some of our listeners are saying, don't think that's insignificant. Charles, the Queen, and the royal family are directly related to Vlad the Impaler, as we know. The most famous, one of, if not the most famous Satanists, and we believe reptilian hybrid bloodlines out of Romania. Of course, he's the basis for the character of Dracula. That's, a lot of people saying don't discount that. Others are saying mathematics are very dangerous to the system because of the digital level of the illusion. We just touched on that as well. Question from a number of listeners. I don't want to depress you now, but I'll put this to you anyway. You must know that saying what you're saying and talking to people like me is not going to be helpful to your career. You know that, right?
I actually don't think so because it depends on, first of all, what you want your career to be. I mean, do you want your career to be in a very corrupt system that's preying on people? I don't want to do that. I want to reach out to genuine people, and in fact, I want to reach out to those people who've got genuine problems. And I actually think that I was so grateful when you replied, and I was actually ecstatic because I've always listened to your show, and essentially this is how I heard about, for example, Andrea Davison, with whom I've since gotten in touch. And I always found that you interviewed the interesting people, the genuine people, the people who brought me further when I was trying to understand complex systems. Because I've listened to your show for a very, very long time, trying to puzzle together what's actually happening in the world. And everything that I know tells me I have to go this way. I have to go to the people who actually have seen all this, who understand it, because we have to start our work here. Everything else is an illusion. The problems that they say are real problems are kind of problems, but not the biggest ones, and not even problems in a way they present them to be, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, yeah.
And so I genuinely think, and by the way, I mean, I have always done my own thing. I've always gone after the research I thought was genuinely helping people, not what academia does, because there's also a lot of problems in academia, and the funding doesn't always go to the best projects, as probably everybody can imagine.
Do you know what you've just said there will be music to the ears of researchers like David Icke, researchers like many of the men and women who come on this program, because they often say that one of the greatest sources of their frustration is that clever men and women, whether they work in academia or not, often won't go down the roads that the evidence is taking them for fear of ridicule, for fear of isolation, I suppose, and for fear of damage to their career. A lot of abuse has been suffered by people who have left lucrative careers, David being the obvious one, because the system didn't make any sense to him. And while and don't take this the wrong way now, because I'm absolutely thrilled you're on this program. I think you're amazing. I'm delighted you're on. While guys like him and others, they don't need the validation of academia, they're also very smart and they understand how important it is, because Catherine, the average man and woman looks at Richie Allen, idiot. Presenter who talks a lot of crap, he's an idiot. They look at you and they go, PhD, Oxford University, worked in big scientific projects, we believe her. So you saying these things and explaining what happened to you in the way you have done, that is, and I believe you believe it. And I know it's happened to other people. You probably aren't aware of the enormous good it does when somebody with your background breaks water, comes up for air and says, right, this is what's happening. Do you get that?
Well, I would like to say two things. When you said, people say, Richie Allen's just an idiot, I think you misunderstand. I think that's probably because a lot of your programs are on YouTube. I have to say I have a completely different impression. So all the people who are really interesting, really going after the right stuff, the highly interesting stuff, the